Have you ever watched someone deliberately destroy irreplaceable documents that could save your child's life? That's exactly what happened when our HOA president decided my daughter's medical records were unsightly clutter on our porch, and took it upon herself to burn them while we were at the hospital. In Hampton, Virginia, I, Michael Thompson, a 52-year-old deputy commissioner for health services, live with my 12-year-old daughter, Emma, who battles a rare respiratory condition. We had just returned from a grueling specialist appointment, Emma leaning on me as we navigated her oxygen equipment up the steps to our home. Exhausted, I set her comprehensive medical binder, a thick, meticulously organized collection of original test results, specialist notes, and treatment history, on the covered porch for a moment while I helped Emma inside. This binder was her lifeline, documenting years of treatments, failed approaches, allergic reactions, and the only protocol keeping her stable as her condition worsened, leading to frequent hospitalizations. After settling Emma, I stepped back outside to grab the binder, only to freeze at the sight of Karen Tompkins, our HOA president, standing in my driveway. Karen, always armed with her clipboard and a smug sense of authority, was feeding pages from Emma's binder into a small fire in a metal trash can, the smoke curling upward. Her luxury SUV was parked nearby, and her clipboard, stacked with HOA violation notices, rested against the can. I shouted, rushing toward her, but she barely looked up. "Your porch isn't the storage area," she said, tossing another page into the flames. "I've warned you about clutter. This neighborhood has standards." "Those are my daughter's medical records," I yelled, my voice cracking. "They're irreplaceable," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You can get copies. Stop being dramatic." I lunged for the can, kicking it over and stomping out the flames, but it was too late. Most of the binder's contents were ash or charred beyond recognition. My hands shook as I salvaged what little remained, fragments of test results. A half-burned specialist letter. These weren't just papers. They were the only comprehensive record of Emma's medical journey, pieced together from specialists across the country, some now retired, others from facilities that had shuttered. Without them, her doctors would be flying blind, risking treatments that could harm her. Standing there, watching years of irreplaceable medical documentation turn to ash, I felt a rage I've never experienced. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have called the police immediately? Confronted her more aggressively? Let me know in the comments. How would you handle someone who destroyed your child's vital medical history? Karen thought she was enforcing HOA rules. She didn't realize she had just committed multiple felonies against the family of someone who helps oversee the entire state health system. That evening, my home office became a war room. The partially burned binder sat on my desk, a grim reminder of the day's catastrophe. Emma was in her bedroom, her nebulizer humming as she struggled to breathe, each labored gasp tightening the knot in my chest. I grabbed my phone and called her primary doctor, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at me. I explained Karen's actions, detailing how the destroyed records contained critical details, medications she was allergic to, treatments that had failed, and the delicate protocol keeping her stable. Without the full history, her doctor warned, we'd need to repeat costly, invasive tests, risk reintroducing failed treatments, and navigate her allergies blindly. Every minute without those records increased the danger to Emma. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with a growing list of calls to medical facilities across the country. Some records might be recoverable, but many specialists had retired, and several clinics had closed. The task felt Sisyphean, but I had no choice. Emma's nebulizer droned in the background, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Then, a notification pinged. An email from Karen, formal and dripping with audacity, outlined an HOA violation notice for improper waste disposal and unauthorized storage on the porch. She demanded a $500 fine, as if burning Emma's medical records was a minor administrative oversight. I stared at the screen, disbelief giving way to cold determination. Karen had no idea the storm she'd unleashed. I began documenting everything. I photographed the charred remains of the binder, each scorched page a testament to her recklessness. Our security camera had captured her in the act, her face illuminated by the fire as she fed page after page into the flames. I saved the footage, time-stamped and clear. Neighbors had seen her too, and I collected their statements. Mrs. Lawson across the street described Karen's smug demeanor. Mr. Patel next door confirmed the acrid smell of burning paper. I typed a detailed account of the medical impact, citing Emma's worsening condition and the risks of incomplete records. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the case I was building. Karen's violation notice sat on my desk, her clipboard's petty authority now a weapon I'd turn against her. She thought she could bully us into submission, but she'd miscalculated. As Deputy Commissioner for Health Services, I knew the system, and not just the medical one, but the legal and bureaucratic machinery that could grind her actions into consequences. I didn't want special treatment. I wanted justice, methodical and airtight. I reached out to colleagues at the Department of Health, the Medical Licensing Board, and the State Attorney General's office. My emails were precise, outlining Karen's actions and their implications without asking for favors. I attached photos, the security footage, and my account of Emma's medical crisis. On my laptop, a spreadsheet tracked each contact, their responses and next steps. My personal notebook, open beside it, contained a strategic plan. One column for Emma's immediate medical needs, another for Karen's reckoning. I wasn't just a grieving father. I was a professional who knew how to wield evidence like a scalpel. Emma's cough echoed from her room, pulling me back to the present. I checked on her, adjusting her oxygen mask as she gave me a weak smile. "We'll fix this, sweetheart," I promised. Though the weight of those words pressed hard, the binder's loss wasn't just paperwork. It was a map of her survival, now reduced to ash. I returned to my desk, the clock ticking past midnight. Sleep wasn't an option. The next morning, Karen escalated. A new email announced an HOA meeting to address our ongoing violations. She was doubling down, confident her clipboard and title shielded her. I leaned back in my chair, the burned binder in my peripheral vision. She'd mistaken my silence for surrender. But I was gathering ammunition. I reviewed the evidence again, the photos, the footage, the neighbor statements. I cross-referenced state laws on destruction of medical records and federal HIPAA regulations, noting potential felonies. Karen's actions weren't just HOA overreach. They were criminal. I called a friend at the local police department, not as a commissioner but as a father. I filed a report providing the footage and photos. The officer's tone shifted when he realized the gravity. This wasn't a neighborly dispute, but a deliberate act with life-threatening consequences. "We'll look into it," he assured me. But I wasn't leaving it to chance. I emailed the Attorney General's office again, ensuring the case was flagged. Emma's doctor called with an update. Without the records, they were proceeding cautiously. But tests were already being scheduled, painful, expensive ones we'd fought to avoid. The uncertainty gnawed at me. What if they missed an allergy? What if a wrong treatment sent her back to the ICU? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the plan in my notebook. Step 1. Stabilize Emma's care. Step 2. Hold Karen accountable. By evening, my inbox was filling with responses. A colleague at the Department of Health confirmed they were reviewing the HIPAA implications. The Attorney General's office acknowledged my complaint, promising a thorough investigation. I wasn't pulling strings. I was ensuring the system worked as it should. Karen's confidence came from ignorance, but mine came from preparation. I stood, stretching my aching back, and glanced at Emma's room. The nebulizer's hum was a lifeline, but it wasn't enough. I needed those records, or at least a way to reconstruct them. I sent emails to every specialist I could recall, begging for copies of old notes. Some replied with sympathy but no records. Others hadn't kept files that old. The partial binder on my desk mocked me. A puzzle with too many missing pieces. Karen's violation notice lay crumpled beside it. Her arrogance was her undoing. She'd burned the wrong records, crossed the wrong family. As I prepared for the HOA meeting, I organized my evidence. The police report, the footage, the photos, the laws she'd violated. My briefcase was ready, my resolve ironclad. She wanted a fight, but I was bringing a reckoning. The community was stirring too. Neighbors whispered about Karen's stunt. their sympathy for Emma growing. Mrs. Lawson stopped by with a casserole, her eyes brimming as she apologized for not intervening. "We'll back you," she said. I nodded, grateful but focused. The storm was gathering, and Karen was about to learn what happens when you endanger a child and underestimate her father. Karen expected to conduct her usual kangaroo court. She didn't expect to face a state health official with documentation of criminal negligence. The night before the HOA meeting, I barely slept, my mind racing through the presentation I'd prepared. My briefcase was packed. Official credentials, the police report, photos of the burned binder, security footage, and a detailed breakdown of Karen's legal violations. The charred remains of Emma's medical records, preserved in an evidence bag, were a grim centerpiece. I'd contacted neighbors who'd endured Karen's overreach. Petty fines, invasive inspections, relentless bullying, and several agreed to speak. My laptop held a slideshow citing federal HIPAA laws, state statutes on destruction of medical records, and criminal codes for property destruction and endangerment. This wasn't just a defense, it was a prosecution. The community clubhouse buzzed with anticipation as neighbors filled the folding chairs. Karen sat at the front table, clipboard in hand, her posture radiating authority. She wore a smug smile, oblivious to the storm about to break. I took a seat near the front, my briefcase at my feet, my expression calm but unyielding. The room quieted as Karen began, her voice clipped as she listed my violations. The porch clutter, the supposed improper waste disposal. She framed the burning as a necessary enforcement of HOA standards, glossing over the medical records as if they were junk mail. I raised my hand, cutting her off. "May I have the floor?" My tone was polite but firm. Karen hesitated, her eyes narrowing. But the packed room left her no choice. She nodded curtly. I stood, briefcase in hand, and faced the crowd. For those who don't know me, I'm Michael Thompson, Deputy Commissioner for Health Services. I held up my credentials, letting the weight of my title settle. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's smile faltered. I opened my laptop, projecting my slideshow onto the clubhouse screen. The first image was a photo of Emma's burned binder. Pages reduced to ash. Gasps echoed. These were my daughter Emma's medical records. I said, my voice steady. Original test results, specialist notes, treatment histories, irreplaceable documents critical to managing her rare respiratory condition. Karen Tompkins burned them, claiming they were clutter. I clicked to the security footage, Karen's figure clear as she fed pages into the fire. The room grew deathly silent. I walked through the legal violations methodically. Under federal HIPAA laws, unauthorized destruction of medical records is a serious offense, with penalties including fines and potential jail time. I cited the specific statute, the text displayed on the screen. Virginia state law classifies deliberate destruction of medical documentation as a felony when it endangers a patient's health. I showed the relevant code. Additionally, burning private property and reckless endangerment carry their own criminal penalties. I paused, letting the implications sink in. Karen's actions also expose her to civil damages, potentially in the hundreds of thousands, for the medical and emotional harm caused. The slideshow ended with a photo of Emma, oxygen mask on, taken during her last hospitalization. "This is what's at stake," I said. "My daughter's life depends on those records. Without them, her doctors are guessing, risking allergic reactions and failed treatments." I turned to Karen. "You didn't just burn papers. You endangered a child." The room erupted. Neighbors whispered, some visibly angry. Karen gripped her clipboard, her face pale. She tried to interrupt, but I pressed on, inviting neighbors to share their stories. Mrs. Lawson stood, trembling, recounting how Karen fined her for a single weed in her yard. Mr. Patel described Karen's unannounced inspections, her demands to remove cultural decorations. Others followed, their voices rising. A chorus of grievances exposing Karen's reign of petty tyranny. The HOA board members at the front table shifted uncomfortably, inching their chairs away from her. Karen snapped. "I was enforcing the rules," she shouted. slamming her clipboard down. "This neighborhood has standards, and I'm the only one who cares." Her voice cracked as she pointed at me. "He's exaggerating, making it sound worse than it is. It was just paper." The outburst backfired. Neighbors booed, and a woman in the back yelled, "You burned a kid's medical records." Karen's arguments grew erratic. Her face flushed as she rambled about community aesthetics and personal responsibility. I stayed silent, letting her unravel. The evidence spoke for itself. I closed my briefcase, my point made. The HOA board chair, a quiet man who'd always deferred to Karen, cleared his throat. "We'll need to review this matter," he said, avoiding her gaze. The meeting adjourned in chaos, neighbors clustering around me, offering support and outrage. Karen stormed out, her clipboard abandoned on the table. Outside, I exhaled, the weight of the confrontation settling. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma's doctor. Her condition was stable, but they needed to schedule more tests. The urgency of her care pulled me back to reality. The showdown had been necessary, but it didn't replace those records. I drove home, the evidence bag on the passenger seat, my mind already shifting to the next steps. The community was changing. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, notes of solidarity, even apologies for not challenging Karen sooner. A retired nurse down the street offered to help reconstruct Emma's records, suggesting a neighborhood drive for medical documentation. The whispers about Karen grew louder. Her actions weren't just a mistake but a betrayal. Her husband avoided eye contact at the mailbox, and rumors swirled that they were considering moving. My notebook now had a new section: community response. I jotted down names of neighbors willing to help, their skills, their stories. The HOA meeting had cracked Karen's facade, but it had also sparked something else. A sense of unity I hadn't seen before. I emailed the Attorney General's office with an update, attaching the slideshow and neighbor statements. The legal machinery was turning, but so was the neighborhood. Emma's nebulizer hummed as I checked on her that night. She looked up from her book, her eyes tired but curious. "Did you win?" she asked. I smiled, brushing her hair back. "We're getting there." The victory wasn't complete. Not yet. Karen's reckoning was just beginning, and Emma's health still hung in the balance. But the community was waking up, and I was ready for the next battle. Karen thought she was above the law. Now she was facing it from multiple directions, and it was moving faster than she could run. The week after the HOA meeting, the legal gears churned into high gear. Karen was charged with destruction of property, reckless endangerment, and interference with medical care. Felonies that carried serious weight. The police report, bolstered by my security footage and neighbor statements, left little room for defense. She was released on bail with a strict order to stay away from our family. A copy of the local newspaper, its front page detailing her arrest, sat on my desk, the headline a stark reminder of her fall. I didn't gloat. I was too focused on Emma. Her condition took a terrifying turn. Without the complete medical records, her doctors proceeded cautiously. But caution wasn't enough. They scheduled tests to rebuild her treatment plan. During one session, a medication triggered a severe allergic reaction, one her destroyed records would have flagged. Emma's breathing faltered, her face paling as monitors blared. She was rushed to intensive care, tubes and wires snaking around her fragile frame. I sat by her bedside, my hand gripping hers, guilt and rage warring inside me. If I'd retrieved the binder sooner, if I'd anticipated Karen's madness, could this have been avoided? The doctors stabilized her, but the setback was a brutal reminder of the stakes. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down. She told neighbors I was exaggerating for sympathy, dismissing Emma's crisis as unrelated to her actions. Her denial only deepened her isolation. The community, once cowed by her clipboard, turned on her. For sale signs sprouted in front of her house, her husband's embarrassment palpable as he avoided eye contact. Neighbors rallied around us in ways I hadn't expected. Mrs. Lawson organized a meal train, her casseroles piling up in our fridge. Mr. Patel, who'd photographed Emma's records years ago for an insurance claim, sent me grainy images of test results. A retired nurse, Ms. Carter, launched a medical documentation drive, urging residents to share any records they'd kept from Emma's past treatments. Partial files trickled in: lab reports, a specialist's letter, a medication list, each piece a lifeline in reconstructing Emma's history. I worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the new documents with my notes. My home office was a maze of papers, my laptop screen glowing with emails to specialists begging for old records. Some replied with fragments. Others had nothing. The partially burned binder, still on my desk, was a haunting relic. But the community's efforts gave me hope. I digitized every scrap, building a new, secure database for Emma's care. My notebook tracked progress. One column for medical recovery, another for legal accountability. The Attorney General's office moved swiftly. My slideshow from the HOA meeting, now part of their file, outlined Karen's HIPAA violations and endangerment charges. A colleague confirmed the case was a priority, not because of my title but because of the precedent it set. Destroying medical records wasn't just personal. It was a public health issue. I sent updates, attaching Ms. Carter's documentation drive results and Emma's hospital reports. The legal net tightened, and Karen's bravado crumbled. Emma's ICU stay stretched into days. I slept in a hospital chair, my briefcase a makeshift desk. Between doctor updates, I reviewed the case. Karen's plea negotiations were underway, her lawyer pushing for leniency. But the evidence was overwhelming. The community's outrage, amplified by local news, added pressure. Neighbors posted on social media, their stories of Karen's overreach going viral. A petition to dissolve the HOA board gained traction, with calls for new leadership. The clubhouse, once Karen's throne room, became a hub for change. One evening, Ms. Carter stopped by the hospital with a USB drive. More records, she said, her eyes bright. A neighbor found old emails from Emma's allergist. I plugged the drive into my laptop, tears pricking as I saw a detailed allergy profile, one that could have prevented Emma's reaction. I hugged Miss Carter, gratitude overwhelming me. The community wasn't just helping. They were saving us. Karen's husband called, his voice strained. He apologized, offering to pay for Emma's medical bills. I declined, directing him to the courts. Restitution would come through the legal system, not backdoor deals. The call confirmed what I'd suspected. Karen was unraveling, her family fracturing under the weight of her actions. I felt no pity, only resolve. Emma was discharged after a week, weaker but stable. Her doctors used the new records to refine her protocol, avoiding further missteps. I brought her home, her oxygen tank humming as she settled into her room. The community support continued. Neighbors dropped off books for Emma, cards, even a quilt from a local church. The HOA board, spooked by the petition, announced Karen's permanent removal and promised reforms. I offered to help draft inclusive policies, ensuring no one else would face Karen's brand of discrimination. The legal case neared resolution. Karen faced a choice: a trial with damning evidence or a plea deal. Her lawyer pushed for the latter, and I was consulted. The proposed terms included significant community service at a medical facility, restitution for Emma's medical costs, mandatory disability rights education, and a permanent ban from HOA roles. I discussed it with Emma, her small voice firm despite her fatigue. She needs to learn, Dad, not just be punished. I agreed, supporting the rehabilitation-focused deal. Justice wasn't about vengeance. It was about protecting others. As Emma slept, I updated my notebook. The medical column showed progress. Her records were 60% restored, with backups now cloud-secured. The legal column listed Karen's charges, the plea terms, and the HOA's reforms. The community column was the longest, filled with names: Mrs. Larson, Mr. Patel, Ms. Carter, and acts of kindness. Karen had tried to erase Emma's history, but the neighborhood had rewritten it. I stood at our porch, the spot where the binder once sat. The air was crisp, the for sale sign across the street a quiet victory. The system was working not because of my position but because I'd used it. Evidence, law, community. Karen's reckoning was nearly complete, but our fight for Emma's health and the neighborhood's soul was far from over. Karen wanted to create a perfect community by eliminating any signs of illness or disability. Instead, she created a united community that rallied around its most vulnerable members. The courthouse was quiet as Karen's case reached its conclusion. Facing undeniable evidence, security footage, neighbor testimonies, and the charred remains of Emma's medical records, she accepted a plea deal. The terms were strict: 500 hours of community service at a medical facility, $50,000 in restitution to cover Emma's hospital bills, mandatory disability rights training, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board. I stood in the courtroom, my briefcase lighter now, and nodded when the judge asked if I supported the terms. Emma's words echoed in my mind. She needs to learn. The sentence wasn't just punishment. It was a chance for Karen to confront the harm she'd caused. As she left the courtroom, head bowed, the weight of her actions seemed to finally register. 3 months later, the neighborhood felt different. The HOA, shaken by Karen's downfall, adopted new policies I helped draft. Gone were the draconian fines and invasive inspections. In their place were guidelines prioritizing inclusivity, with provisions for residents with medical needs. The community clubhouse, once Karen's stage for petty power plays, now housed an emergency medical response kit and a secure repository for residents' medical information. Inspired by Ms. Carter's documentation drive, Emma's new medical record system, digitized and backed up on multiple cloud servers, was its cornerstone. I checked the database daily, ensuring every lab result, specialist note, and allergy profile was accounted for. The binder's loss still stung, but the community had rebuilt what Karen tried to destroy. Emma's health stabilized, though her condition remained fragile. The restored records, 70% complete thanks to neighbors' contributions, allowed her doctors to refine her treatment, avoiding further allergic reactions. She returned to school part-time, her oxygen tank a quiet companion. Neighbors greeted her with smiles, some slipping her books or candy, their affection a balm after months of hardship. I watched her laugh with a friend on our porch, the same spot where Karen's fire had burned, and felt a cautious hope. We weren't out of the woods, but we weren't alone anymore. Karen's old house had new owners, a young family with a son who used a wheelchair. I welcomed them with a casserole, a nod to Mrs. Lawson's kindness. The mother, a nurse, joined Ms. Carter's medical documentation initiative, offering to train residents on emergency response. The for sale sign was gone, replaced by a ramp and a brightly painted mailbox. The neighborhood was healing, not just from Karen's actions but from years of division her rules had sown. I encountered Karen one last time at the hospital, where I was attending a meeting as deputy commissioner. She was there for her community service, pushing a cart of medical supplies, her usual haughtiness replaced by a subdued focus. Our eyes met and she stopped. "Michael," she said, her voice low. I didn't understand what I was doing. "I'm sorry." It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. I nodded, my response measured. "I hope you learn from this." Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. Not yet. But I saw a flicker of change in her. She'd hurt us, but she wasn't beyond redemption. I walked away, my focus back on Emma's care. The community's transformation deepened. Mr. Patel organized a neighborhood watch, not for HOA violations but for mutual support, checking on elderly residents, sharing resources. Mrs. Lawson started a gardening club, her once fine yard now a communal plot where Emma planted sunflowers. The petition to dissolve the old HOA board succeeded, and new members, including Ms. Carter, prioritized transparency and compassion. The clubhouse hosted potlucks, where stories of Karen's overreach gave way to plans for a better future. I spoke at one, sharing Emma's progress and thanking the neighbors who'd stepped up. Their applause was warm, but their actions, those grainy photos, that USB drive, the quilt, meant more. My notebook, once a battle plan, became a record of renewal. The medical column tracked Emma's improving lung function and the database's growth. The legal column was closed, Karen's case resolved. The community column overflowed. Names, initiatives, moments of connection. I added a new section, reflection, where I wrote about the paradox of Karen's act. Her cruelty had exposed her, but it had also awakened the neighborhood's strength. Families like ours managing complex medical needs no longer felt invisible. The repository, the response kit, the inclusive policies, they were shields against future Karens. One evening, Emma and I sat on the porch, her sunflowers blooming across the street. She sketched in her notebook, her oxygen tank humming softly. "Dad," she said, "I'm glad we fought." I smiled, my chest tight with pride. "Me too, kiddo." The fight hadn't just been for her health but for a community that saw her, not as a problem to be hidden, but as a person to be protected. I thought about the broader impact. Emma's story, shared on social media by neighbors, had sparked discussions about disability rights and HOA reform. Local news covered the repository, prompting other communities to adopt similar systems. My colleagues at the Department of Health reached out, interested in scaling the model statewide. Karen's attempt to erase Emma's history had instead amplified her voice. If you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button. Share this with anyone who's faced discrimination or HOA nightmares. Subscribe for more stories of justice served. And don't forget to ring that bell. Have you ever had to fight for your family's health against someone who just didn't understand? Tell me your stories in the comments below. As I closed my laptop, the porch light cast a warm glow. The neighborhood was quieter now, not with fear, but with purpose. Karen had wanted perfection, but she'd forged something better. Unity. Emma's sunflowers swayed in the breeze, a reminder that even from ashes, something beautiful could grow.